You wake each morning to a world that seems already in motion, as though it began without you and now demands that you catch up. Even before your eyes open, you feel it, the hum of expectations, the weight of what waits, the unspoken pressure to shape yourself into someone who can handle it all. The world feels enormous, powerful, and unpredictable. Some days it smiles at you, and you convince yourself you've done something right. Other days it turns cold, and you scan your memory for where you might have failed. Either way, you've learned the same lesson. If you can figure out how to read it, manage it, maybe even please it, then you'll finally be safe. You didn't invent this lesson, you inherited it. Think back far enough, and you can feel its first whispers. Maybe it was the moment a raised voice taught you how quickly love could turn sharp, or the day you realized that praise felt like sunlight, and so you tried to stay in its warmth by being careful, being good, being impressive. Or maybe it wasn't dramatic at all, just a slow accumulation of moments that taught you the same truth. The world reacts, and you must adapt. You were young, so you believed it. How could you not? You thought safety came from making sure everything outside you stayed steady, and so you learned to prepare. You rehearsed conversations in your head so you wouldn't say the wrong thing. You planned your future so meticulously that you forgot to notice the present. You studied the moods of others like weather patterns, scanning their faces for signs of approval, hoping to confirm you were getting it right. When things fell into place, you thought you'd cracked the code. When they didn't, you told yourself you'd try harder tomorrow. Over time, this chase stopped feeling like a choice. It became the air you breathed. Keep the world pleased enough, quiet enough, cooperative enough, and maybe, just maybe, you could finally rest. But that rest never really comes, does it? Even the moments that feel perfect, the rare times when life seems to reward your effort, carry an undertow of fear. How long will this last? What will I do when it ends? And so you grip harder, you work longer, you love cautiously, you build invisible strategies to shield yourself from the chaos. Avoid this person, impress that one, control your image so no one sees the cracks. You call it strength, but it feels more like holding your breath. And for all the effort, it never really works. The world keeps moving, indifferent to your grasp. Circumstances shift without asking your permission. People surprise you, sometimes in ways that break your heart. Even your own mind betrays you. Old fears you thought you'd conquered return. Wounds you swore were healed whisper their way back in. The harder you try to hold it all together, the more fragile it feels. And yet, you cling tighter, because fear has convinced you that control is the only thing keeping you alive. This is the illusion you've been living inside, the belief that the world has the power to define you, that its storms can shatter you and its sunlight can complete you, that your peace depends on bending reality into something you can predict. But notice what happens when you live this way. In trying to control the world, you give it the very power you think you're protecting. You make your freedom conditional on things you can't hold. You build your identity on shifting sand and then wonder why you're always afraid of sinking. Control seduces you because it promises two things: protection from pain and proof of worth. But it never delivers either. Protection becomes paranoia. Proof becomes a hunger that never ends. And in the spaces between victories, because there are victories, aren't there? You can feel the truth. Each win only resets the game. The world claps for you, and for a moment you believe it means something permanent. Then it turns away, and you're left chasing the next round of applause, the next illusion of safety. What if none of that were true? What if nothing outside you had the power to decide who you are? Imagine for a moment that your essence is like the sky. Weather passes through it, storms, sunlight, endless shifting clouds, but none of it alters the sky itself. The sky doesn't bargain with the storm to stay blue. It doesn't shrink when thunder arrives or swell when the air clears. It simply holds it all, untouched by what it holds. What if you are like that? This isn't about pretending pain doesn't matter. It isn't about closing your eyes to injustice or convincing yourself suffering is imaginary. It's about seeing beneath it all, the layer that doesn't rise and fall with circumstance. You felt it before, haven't you? In those fleeting moments that arrive unannounced, the breath that steadies you after a sob, the stillness when you're so lost in beauty that for a second your fears go quiet. That presence has always been there. It doesn't bargain with the world for peace. It doesn't need proof that it exists. It simply is. And yet you've spent most of your life overlooking it, building your sense of self around the act of control, believing that if you could manage enough variables, you could finally relax. But the more you fight to control, the more real the danger seems. Control breeds fear, and fear breeds more control, until you can't tell which came first. It's like trying to hold water in your hands. The tighter you squeeze, the faster it slips away. And here's the quiet truth that begins to dawn as you see this clearly. Control docility just failed to bring you peace. It quietly turns everything into a battle. Every plan becomes a test you must pass. Every relationship becomes a negotiation of power. Every thought becomes an argument with yourself. And though you rarely call it this, what you're really doing is preparing for attack, preparing to defend. Pause long enough to ask yourself, what if none of this decides who I am? What if the storms and the sunlight are just passing weather, and who I am has never been at their mercy? That question doesn't solve everything, but it loosens something. It invites you to wonder why, if the world doesn't truly control you, you keep trying to control it. And beneath that question lies a deeper one still, the one you've been avoiding all along. What is it you are really protecting? You've spent so much of your life trying to keep the world from hurting you that you barely notice how much of yourself has been given away to the effort. It started so quietly you didn't even realize it was happening. You thought you were just learning how to survive, how to read the room, how to stay ahead, how to keep things from falling apart. But under all those strategies is a single unspoken assumption that life might strike if you are not careful. And so, almost without intending to, you begin to live as though everything is either a weapon or a shield. You see it in the obvious moments, heated arguments where you're so desperate to be understood that you stop listening altogether. Moments where you raise your voice or shut it down, convinced that one of you has to win for either of you to feel safe. But it seeps into quieter corners too. You catch yourself judging someone you barely know, thinking it's harmless, never noticing how judgment distorts the way you experience everything. You rehearse imaginary confrontations in your head, perfecting what you'd say if you could go back in time, as though victory in your mind could rewrite the past. Even your achievements carry the taste of defense. If I can just accomplish enough, maybe no one will question my worth. Maybe I'll stop questioning it too. But the strange thing about attack is that it never stays where you aim it. Whether you project it outward or fold it inward, it circles back. You think judgment punishes someone else, but it plants its roots in you, teaching you to see through harsher eyes. You think defense will protect you, but every act of defense is also an admission that you believe you are weak. And so the cycle grows. Every time you try to prove your strength, you reinforce the belief that you were fragile to begin with. Has a single judgment ever brought you peace? Not the brittle satisfaction of feeling superior, but the kind of peace that doesn't need to be earned or guarded. Has outmaneuvering someone ever freed you from fear, or has it only taught you to fear the angles you didn't predict? Even revenge, even triumph, leaves you emptier than before, because what you were really trying to conquer was never the other person. It was the story you carry about yourself, the story that says you were small, unworthy, and forever at the mercy of things you cannot control. And if you look closely, you'll see how the world reflects that story back to you like a mirror. The person whose criticism enrages you sounds almost identical to the voice you use on yourself when no one is around. The chaos you blame for disturbing your peace feels eerily similar to the restlessness you keep feeding with your own thoughts. Attack isn't just something you do, it's the way you've been taught to see. You cast enemies into the world, not realizing they're shadows you first created in your mind. But what if there's another way? Imagine standing in a room with someone you've labeled an enemy. Every movement they make feels loaded with threat. Every word they speak seems designed to harm you. Your body is tense, your mind sharp, scanning for weaknesses, planning your defense. And then, just as an experiment, you imagine for a moment that you drop the label. You notice their shaking hands. You hear the quiver in their voice. You realize they too are afraid. And suddenly the same room feels different, not because they changed, but because you saw more than you were seeing before. This doesn't mean you deny harm where it exists or allow yourself to be mistreated. It means you start to see how much of your suffering comes not from what happens, but from the interpretations you layer on top of it. The stories you sharpen like knives and then hold against your own throat. And the most startling part, you thought those stories were saving you. You thought those weapons were necessary, but all they've done is keep the wound open. There's a kind of courage in setting the weapons down. At first it feels impossible, even reckless. Fear tells you that without them, the world will crush you. But as you test it, something unexpected happens. You begin to notice that what you feared losing was never real power at all. Real power doesn't need attack or defense because it doesn't believe in the premise they rebuilt on. That you can be made more or less by what happens outside of you. You start to see differently. The same situations appear, the same words are spoken, the same uncertainties arise, but you feel them differently because you're no longer meeting them as an enemy. Your vision begins to soften. You notice how anger always hides fear, how arrogance is so often a cry for love, how even your harshest judgments lose their edge when you realize they were always aimed at yourself first. And then something even stranger occurs. You start to wonder if the world you feared was never as solid as you thought. Maybe it was only ever showing you what you believed. And that thought, that tiny trembling thought, is the beginning of a new kind of seeing. If attack and defense only teach you what you fear, what happens when you learn to see without them? What does the world look like when you no longer need to make it your proof of pain or your proof of power? There comes a moment when the weight of defense and attack becomes unbearable, when the armor you have spent a lifetime forging to protect yourself feels less like a shield and more like a cage. You realize that the very strategies meant to keep you safe have become the source of your isolation. The constant vigilance, the rehearsed words, the mental calculations, the judgments you carry, each one has built walls so high and so dense that you barely recognize the person beneath. Beneath the surface, beneath the armor, glimpses of a different self flicker, fragile, vulnerable, longing not for control or safety, but for something infinitely more profound: connection, freedom, peace. Yet the paradox remains. The very defenses that seem necessary now keep you trapped in a cycle of conflict, fear, and separation. You begin to wonder quietly, almost hesitantly, if it might be possible to live without so fiercely fighting to prove your worth, without bracing yourself for the next blow, without defending endlessly against imagined threats. This longing is not weakness. It is the first stirrings of a deeper knowing, a whisper from the core of your being that has been muffled beneath layers of conditioning and survival tactics. It invites you to question everything you have been taught about power, strength, and protection. What if power is not the ability to dominate, to control others or circumstances, but the courage to be truly vulnerable? What if the deepest strength lies not in pushing fear away or hiding from it, but in facing it openly, with honesty and tenderness? You have witnessed this truth in rare moments when your defenses slipped, when laughter erupted with a stranger, when tears spilled quietly in solitude, when you felt utterly still and connected beneath the vastness of early morning light. In these moments, a profound truth reveals itself. You are not the battles you fight, not the roles you play, but the awareness that watches them, unshaken beneath the shifting scenes of life. Imagine a river flowing effortlessly through a landscape, bending gracefully around rocks, swelling with the rain, retreating in the dry season, yet always moving forward with a quiet resilience. The river does not resist the obstacles it encounters. It does not cling desperately to the past waters it has carried away. Instead, embraces the flow, navigating the twists and turns with a supple strength and ease. This river is a metaphor for the freedom that waits when you choose to stop resisting, when you release the need to control or attack, when you allow yourself to be carried by life's current. True freedom does not lie in escaping pain, uncertainty, or loss, but in welcoming them as essential parts of the journey, in learning to move with them instead of against them. It is the courage to stop fighting the river and to discover how to navigate its endless flow with grace and presence. This profound shift in perception does not arrive suddenly or all at once. It unfolds gently, like dawn breaking slowly across a darkened sky. You begin to notice how often you are caught in the endless patterns of blame toward yourself, toward others, toward the world, that keep you imprisoned in conflict and resistance. You see with growing clarity how old wounds resurface not only because of external events, but because of the internal stories you tell yourself, the beliefs you hold tightly that feed fear and separation. You start to ask new questions, questions that open doors rather than slam them shut. What would it mean to offer compassion instead of judgment? What might happen if I listened more deeply to the voices of others and to the quiet whispers of my own heart? What if I could hold my fear gently without letting it dictate my actions or define my worth? As these questions take root and blossom within you, the relentless cycle of attack and defense begins to loosen its grip. You discover moments of peace even amidst chaos, fragile glimpses of calm in the eye of the storm. You come to realize that peace is not a distant destination to be reached or earned, but a state to be remembered, a home you carry within, waiting patiently beneath the noise and distractions. This journey is not about fixing yourself or changing the world, but about rediscovering the part of you that has always been whole, untouched by circumstance or time. And so, with every breath, you learn to trust more deeply. Trust that you are enough exactly as you are in this very moment. Trust that the world is not your enemy, but your teacher. Trust that vulnerability is not failure, but the doorway to true strength and freedom. This is the freedom beyond control, beyond attack and defense, the freedom to be seen fully, to be known deeply, and to live with an open, tender heart, even when the world feels uncertain and ever-changing. At some point in the unfolding of your journey, you come to realize that freedom is not a distant horizon to be chased, nor a treasure to be found buried in some elusive place beyond your reach. It is not the reward for enduring hardship or the outcome of perfect circumstances. Instead, freedom reveals itself as a way of being, a quiet, persistent unfolding of your true self beyond the masks, defenses, and roles you have carried for so long. This way of being does not announce itself with fanfare or urgency. It is subtle, soft, and deeply rooted, like a seed waiting patiently beneath the winter's snow, or the slow and steady pulse of the earth beneath shifting skies. It feels like coming home to a place inside yourself that you may have forgotten existed, the essence beneath the stories, beneath the fears, beneath the endless striving and relentless control. This essence is like the vast, deep ocean beneath restless, churning waves, calm, mysterious, and unchanging. It holds you steady even as the surface roils with uncertainty, chaos, and shifting circumstances. When you allow yourself to touch this place within, the urge to control begins to unravel and lose its grip, because you come to know in the deepest fibers of your being that you are already safe. Not because the world has grown easier, softer, or more predictable, but because your sense of self no longer leans upon external conditions or fleeting approvals. You begin to rest in yourself, even when the storms rage around you, and this rest is not weakness, but an unshakable strength. This awakening is not about achieving perfection or erasing the inevitable pains of life. It is a profound embracing of your wholeness, the light and shadow, the courage and vulnerability, the certainty and the doubt, all woven together into the living tapestry of your existence. You learn, perhaps slowly and with great tenderness, to welcome every part of your experience without judgment or resistance. You learn to sit with discomfort, fear, confusion, and uncertainty, not as enemies to be banished or problems to be fixed, but as messengers, teachers, and companions on your path. In this radical openness, you discover a peace that does not depend on changing what happens around you, a wellspring of love and acceptance that flows freely, even when the world feels harsh, indifferent, or cruel. Beneath the turbulence of daily life, you find a quiet refuge, an inner sanctuary that is always available, always steady, always waiting to hold you with compassion. As you cultivate this presence within, something subtle yet profound begins to shift in your relationships. You no longer seek validation or protection from others because you have found those things within yourself. Your connections with others arise not from need or fear, but from genuine compassion, authenticity, and curiosity. The walls and defenses you built so carefully to keep others out start to soften, crack, and eventually crumble, allowing true intimacy, understanding, and trust to grow. You begin to see others not as threats, critics, or mirrors reflecting your insecurities, but as fellow travelers on this shared journey of life, each carrying their own hidden wounds, longings, and dreams. This recognition fosters empathy and dissolves the isolation and loneliness that once felt like a permanent state. The boundaries between self and other become more permeable, revealing a shared humanity that invites kindness, forgiveness, and connection. With this new vision, life transforms from a battlefield where you must defend your ground into a dance, a fluid, ever-changing movement of give and take, ebb and flow, presence and absence. You learn to navigate the uncertain and the unknown with grace rather than resistance, to meet challenges with curiosity instead of fear, and to hold your breath no longer in anxious anticipation of what might come next. The world ceases to feel like an adversary to be conquered and instead becomes an invitation, a dance partner inviting you to move with it, to listen to its rhythms, to discover harmony in its ever-shifting patterns. In this dance, there is room for strength and softness, courage and surrender, movement and stillness, all coexisting in beautiful tension. And in this dance of life, you find the deepest freedom imaginable, the freedom to be fully and unapologetically yourself, the freedom to choose love over fear, presence over distraction, peace over turmoil, every single moment. This freedom is not a gift handed down by the world, nor something to be earned or lost. It is something you claim from within, again and again, breath by breath, choice by choice. It is the quiet but powerful knowing that your true self was never lost or broken, only hidden beneath the stories, fears, and illusions you once believed. This freedom is a sacred gift, one you can unwrap time and time again, a home to which you can return no matter what storms rage outside. It is the radiance that shines through you when you no longer hide in shadow, the light that illuminates even the darkest nights. In the quiet space that opens when the relentless need for control falls away, you begin to see with startling clarity what has always been true beneath the surface noise and distraction, that you are not defined by the events that happen to you, nor by the roles you have played to survive, nor by the fears and judgments you carry so heavily. You are far more than the stories you have told yourself about who you must be to be accepted, to belong, to be loved. You are the awareness in which those stories arise, the pure presence that watches without judgment or resistance, the infinite space beyond thought and circumstance. This realization is not a distant or abstract idea, but a living, breathing truth that unfolds gently and inexorably within you, moment by moment, revealing itself in the simplest acts of surrender, acceptance, and softening. You come to understand that peace is not something to be grasped, chased, or held tightly. It is something you allow to arise naturally when you stop resisting what is. It is the stillness beneath the noise, the calm beneath the storm, the unshakable ground beneath shifting sands. This peace does not depend on circumstances, achievements, or the approval of others. It is your natural state, waiting patiently beneath the turmoil and ever-changing seasons of life. When you rest in this peace, you no longer fight against the flow of existence. Instead, you move with it, open, alive, responsive to whatever arises in each precious moment. And with this surrender comes a profound freedom, the freedom to live without fear, without pretense, without the exhausting and futile need to control every outcome or defend every piece of your identity. You come to see that true strength lies not in resistance, but in vulnerability. That courage is not the absence of fear, but the willingness to face it with an open and tender heart. You find the space to love deeply, to forgive freely, to be tender with yourself and others without reservation. The walls built by doubt, shame, and defense crumble into dust, and in their place grows an unshakable trust, a trust in yourself and the unfolding of life. In the unseen grace that moves through all things and holds everything together. This trust is not something earned through struggle or achieved by force. It is remembered through stillness and presence. It is a gift you give yourself anew each day when you choose to be present rather than distracted, compassionate rather than judgmental, loving rather than fearful. It is the quiet knowing that beneath all the shifting scenes of life, you are already whole, already complete, already free. So now, as you stand at the edge of what you once thought defined you, you step forward with a courage that is entirely new. Not the courage born from resistance and defense, but the courage born from surrender and openness. You release the desperate need to hold tight, and in that release, you find everything you have ever sought. Peace, love, freedom, and the boundless joy of simply being alive. The journey does not end here, nor does it demand perfection or constant effort. It only asks that you keep coming home to yourself again and again with kindness, patience, and unwavering faith in the light within that never dims. Because you are not the storms you have weathered. You are the sky itself, vast, clear, and endlessly free, holding all that comes with a quiet strength and infinite grace.